Well, that was awesome. So just before we break, we have one more thing we want to do. We want to spend a few moments together. Jeff Martens is up here. He's on our board. Karen West, vice chair on our board, and Ed is up here as well. I'm Jeff Jantzi. I'm the chair of our board. We want to spend a few moments talking a little bit about this covenant that Ed talked about and sort of the history behind it, the process that went into kind of developing this thing, what it's all about. And then after we're done talking about it for a little bit, we're actually going to share that covenant with you. I think it's going to be handed out, distributed so that you can get a look at the draft copy of some of the things that we are thinking about in regards to this covenant and what that could look like. So we'll start with Jeff. What we did, and he'll share a little bit about this as a board, Ed talked about the retreat. In this come to the table moment, this idea of the MB conference being family. And at the end of the day, that's what we are. We're a family. We're not just an organization or a bunch of churches that get together once a year to have fun and vote on budgets and things like this. We're a family, right? And what do families do? They come to the table together. They never stop coming to the table together, even when there's disagreement, all these kinds of things. So it's really a profound moment for us as we really sense the Lord speaking to us about this. And so what we did is we talked about what does it mean to be MB then, in light of this, to be the MB family. And we thought we need to have some sort of covenant to rally around. I'm probably stealing a little bit of Jeff's thunder here, some of his answer to the question I'm about to ask here. But we set out a kind of task force. Jeff was on it, Karen was on it, Ed was on it, and Mandy Casper as well was on it, and they spent some time developing this covenant together. So Jeff, if you could just, as you guys worked on this covenant together, talked about it, processed it, if you could just talk a little bit about why and how we even got to the whole covenant thing, why this is important, what's significant about this covenant piece, and explain some of that to everybody, that'd be great.
Yeah, for me, probably some of the thinking and the story kind of starts before we even got to any sort of concept or idea of sort of a conference covenant. I've just been on the board for a year. It was last convention that I was sort of added to the board and joined in and whatnot. And it's kind of been a year of just newness for me and kind of more engagement in certainly our board activities, but even just the conference experience and whatnot. And I've said this to the board a couple times, probably especially in my first 6 months of participating, that I think from last year's convention and then in the board involvement, I've kind of felt like the 3-year-old who just asks why about everything they encounter. Why? Like, why is this like that? Or what does this mean? A lot of whys and whats to try to kind of understand what as a family we are about and what we're trying to do, and what in this era, which I love how Ed described, and I certainly have sensed this era of renewal, kind of, okay, so where is it kind of going now? What's the direction? And would have felt like I wasn't totally clear even as I got onboarded at a board level. And I know in our church context, there's a Christian leadership consultant named Patrick Lencioni who's been a helpful sort of voice for us when it comes to sort of planning direction and strategic sort of initiatives and that kind of thing. And one of the things he would say is that one of the most important jobs of leaders is to create clarity, to help people to be able to buy in, to know where you're going, to come with you, to sort of join in that family journey. And he talks about creating the kind of clarity that, like, the people that follow you, they can kind of repeat it behind your back in sort of a laugh it off kind of way, because they know so in such crystal clarity where you're going. And so as we kind of were journeying through how do we create more of that, especially in this season of various sort of transitions at the national level and in this season of renewal, it led to us planning this 2-day retreat as a board. And sort of what we were planning to work through is actually some of Patrick Lencioni's material that he describes as the 6 critical questions that kind of any organization or any leader should be able to answer with sort of resolute consistency and clarity. Why do you exist? How do you behave as a team or as an organization? What do you do? Just really simple sort of concrete questions. And then a few others about kind of what's most important right now and who's on what and that kind of thing. So we kind of set out to work through that. And as we were doing that, I think one of the things I was discovering and we were discovering as a team is frankly answers to those questions. Part of it was creating sort of clear language and a bit of a framework to them. And what we found is that we probably need to derive on a way to how do we now, if we do have answers to these questions, and we do have things that we're doing, how do we package them in a way that our churches and our leaders of our churches can be clear on what those are, and have a way to sort of buy into them, and especially in any places where there's been confusion, or in some of those seasons where it's been harder or had brokenness, and we've been talking about reconciliation and whatnot. How can we create the clear picture so that we know how to invite people either back to that table or so that re-invitation to kind of covenant and commit to, here's what we can do better together as a family than any of us can do on our own. So that's kind of my version of it.
Yeah, I think those 6 critical questions are critical, literally. No, they're very helpful for us. I mean, some of the stuff, once you get talking about it, maybe it seems obvious. Some of those questions seem so basic, but once you drill into it, it's just tremendously helpful. And Jeff actually helped facilitate some of that discussion for us as a board and did a great job. And really, with kind of the fresh eyes that he brought as a new board member to our team, was able to kind of draw out some really important things for us. And we know that there's churches in our conference and people in our conference who sometimes wonder, why bother being MB? You know, what's the point of being an MB church, leaning into the conference, coming to the table? What's the point of all that? And I think for us to have some time together as a board to really drill into those questions, it helped bring some clarity. And we're really hoping that this covenant is going to help us accomplish that too. Just bring some clarity for us as a collection of churches around what it is to be MB, what it is to be family together across this great province and across this great country as well. So Karen, if you could just talk for a few moments about just drilling a little bit deeper into what it is that we're actually hoping this covenant thing accomplishes. What are we want clarity, we want a sense of unity, all that kind of stuff, but at a deeper level, what are some things that we're really hoping to see God do in our denomination through this covenant? Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that. Well, I have a copy of the covenant, and as was said earlier, you're going to get a copy of it too, in probably about 15 minutes. And it's a draft, so it's still going to be open for a lot of conversation, but it's really not a document that we're looking to have for the sake of having a document, or sort of something that we're all going to sign off on and say, check mark, done. It's more about capturing the movement that we think we've in faith believe God has been journeying us on over years, decades, moving us to this place, so that we can come together around something and say, yes, we gather together as churches for these purposes. So it's not a piece of paper, it's not a to-do list, it's an identity thing. You know, I kind of thought to the answer to this question, like, well, why bother with this? Why do this? I think that's the key question that's always going to be on each of our hearts, if we're honest. Like, is it just one more thing to do? So I have a little acronym for you so that you're not going to forget why we would enter into a covenant, and it's CUP. So you're going to go to bed tonight, trust me, and you're going to say, that Karen put this in my head, and I can't get it out. It's already been talked about a little bit, CUP. So C for clarity, U for unity, and P for potential. So the clarity piece really comes around, and you're going to see this as the formational structure of the covenant, comes around our ministry model that we've been talking to you about and dialoguing with our churches about over the last couple of years in kind of a really focused way, and you've seen both provincial and national conversations about that at conventions in the last 2 years, where we have our 4 parts that you will have heard about. Our developing leaders. This is the draft, so you're going to see them right in it. Developing leaders, building community, multiplying churches, resourcing ministry. And then we've added, with some national conversation, establishing holistic gospel presence. And when you read those through, you'll get a little bit more reminder or understanding of what that's all about. But that clarity piece is identifying those things that we're working on together, that our churches are partnering and kind of arm in arm, whether, I mean, Ontario's such a big, gigantic province. So we're sometimes arm in arm from a distance, but still together. What are those clarifying pieces that we can say we're all working on these things as one united conference in Ontario? And then that brings us to the unity. That's our U in CUP. The unity piece that we can say, yeah, we're in this together. We're shoulder to shoulder. We have an understanding of our identity. And that watching world out there, that those people who we love who don't know Jesus, who are watching us and they see us in this kind of clarity and unity together, they want that. They may not realize that they do just yet, but when we are unified together, it draws them in. And then that's the P, the potential piece is like, what is the potential that we can imagine as churches across this province and across this country, if we're journeying together on a common cause, rallying our resources, sharing them with one another, partnering together, the potential for the kingdom just becomes greater and greater as we continue in that journey. So when you see the covenant, you're going to think CUP. And you're going to know the answer to the question, why are we doing this again? You may not remember what it stands for, but that's my little piece for you today.
It's good. One of the challenges I know that we face as a conference, and this isn't unique to Ontario, this is true, I think, of every province across the country here, is that we're a collection of autonomous churches. And so people like Ed, they have a really tough job. They kind of lead by invitation. He says that often. Like, he doesn't really have any authority over our churches or pastors in a governance sense, right? Sometimes I think it's fair to say he wishes that he did. It would make his life a little easier with some of the tricky situations that he finds himself in. But this is the nature of our conference, of our family, is we're relational by nature. So I think even the language of covenant is really critical. This is not a contract. No one's going to be forced into this. This is a relational invitation to come to the table together, to covenant together for the sake of the mission of God in Ontario and across Canada. And it just, I think, again, helps bring some clarity to what it is to be MB. And when Ed steps into these environments with churches, especially when there's some conflict or some challenges, it just gives us something to point to say, hey, this is what we've agreed to, right? This is what it is to be MB. So Ed, you've actually had the opportunity to sit down with some churches and some leaders and go through this draft covenant already with them. Talk a little bit about the reaction that you're getting, some of the things that you're hearing from people as you talk through this covenant with people.
Yeah, I'd love to. I realize that I'm the only person standing between you and a cup of coffee. Or maybe cups of coffee. So I will be brief. I just wanted to mention sort of two stories, two kind of anecdotal pieces, because this is really fresh for us. We really think there's something here. And I guess one of the dangers, of course, is you can almost feel like we're not trying to oversell anything. You might look at this and go, oh, whatever. We're hoping that's not going to be the case. But I do have a couple experiences where I've kind of utilized this resource already. One context, and I'm not going to go into names of churches, but I think that's probably better not to. But in one context, myself and Jeff McLeod, who also sits on our board, were dialoguing with a particular church here in Ontario and their board. And we were going into some pretty heavy conversation around how things have been in the past, how things are in the present, and how much together do we want to be kind of moving forward. And I thought it was a really healthy, dynamic, and quite animated conversation. And we kind of wrapped up, and basically we were done for the night, and we probably could have ended there. And then I just said, oh, by the way, we've just put this thing together. I'd love to test this in the environment. And so passed out a draft copy of this, and we're trying to emphasize it's draft. It can be still grown and developed as we talk together. But it was very fascinating because we just simply read it through. It was brand new for everybody in the circle. And immediately there was kind of almost a different tone. It was like, oh, that's what we're wanting to be about. Yeah, we'd like to do that. I mean, I may be overstating it, and maybe oversimplifying it, but it was just kind of an interesting note to self. It's like, something is here. Maybe God's up to something, which is kind of cool. And then in another context, I've been dialoguing. We have several churches. I mentioned this just in passing earlier. We have several churches that are considering joining our family of Mennonite brethren here in Ontario from a different denomination presently. Prayerfully processing some of that stuff. And again, I was in the context with the leadership board. We had all kinds of fascinating conversations around who we are, would this make sense? Is there a cultural fit? All those kinds of conversations. Just good dialogue. And then once again, I said, well, here's something fresh that we're just working on. We're not sure yet exactly how this is going to traction and move forward. And I presented it, and it was really fascinating because once again, there was like, yeah, that's helpful. So those are, kind of just very preliminary, maybe even mostly my intuitive sense of what was kind of happening in the room, but I go, that's interesting. Like God's up to something. So the plan would be that we pass this information. We're going to have workshops. Everybody can participate. Karen and Jeff, closest to me, Jeff Martens, are going to unpack it a bit more and give you a chance to ask all the questions that you want. And then certainly our hope is that over this next year, ideally, we would love to get to every single church board and talk with you and process and hear from you. And the goal would be a year from now, not only do we have sort of a final document that no longer is called draft, but something that we would invite everybody to sign off on. And this will be asking leadership teams, boards to literally sign off and say, we're in. And we've begun to think a little bit, what if someone says, we're not in? But that's a whole different conversation. We're thinking, most of us, if not all of us, are going to want to be in. So that's been a part of my experience.
Yeah, and I think you said something key in there too. You're going to meet with the boards. This isn't pastor to pastor or leader to leader. This is board to board. This is together. Yep. Our churches agreeing to this, to function and behave in a certain way as the family of God called the Ontario Mennonite Brethren Conference of Ontario. Not called that, but you know what I mean. Anyway.
He's our board chair.
That's right. What is this thing I chair again? It's good. Well, you're going to have an opportunity to hear more about this covenant. As Ed shared, we're going to have some breakouts after lunch. And if you're at all curious to hear more about some of the specific points on the covenant, some of the pieces in there, if you've got questions around, what is meant by a certain point on that covenant, I would really encourage you to come and participate in that workshop.